Hey, I'm Melanie Johnson along with my co-host Jen Foster. We are both 13-time best-selling authors. We've published over 2,500 books and made all of our authors #1 bestsellers. We own Elite Online Publishing. If you want to become a best-selling author, look us up at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Now, welcome to the podcast that shares secrets from top industry experts that show you how to get lasting success and results. This is the Elite Expert Insider Podcast. Hey everyone, how are you doing today? It's Melanie Johnson and Jen Foster. Hi, Jen.
Hey everyone.
So, man, you know what? It's the holiday season. I know I'm dating the show, but it is the holiday season, and people sometimes have ups and downs during the holidays. There's family drama going on and different stuff, and sometimes you're just not feeling it, and you're like, what is wrong with me? Like, what is going on with me? So we've got somebody who is really special to us. His name is Todd Sylvester. He's special because he's one of our authors. We just published his book, I Am Recovered, and it became a #1 bestseller, just blew up on the charts. So he is going to tell us, he's a recovered addict himself, #1. And so many times we ask that question, like, maybe I'm not good enough, or why don't I feel like I'm good? So we're going to talk about that to get you in that good place. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't you love if you could tap into being in that great place? So Todd, thanks for coming today. And I want to remind everybody, make sure you subscribe to our podcast. So we're trying to boost our subscribers, and we would really, really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button, because we always have fabulous guests like Todd who make your life better. So Todd, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a privilege to be on this, and I really appreciate all you guys do. And I'm just grateful to maybe, share a message today that can help your followers and, help their families if we can. And so, but, it's an honor to be on.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. So
Yeah.
tell us, Todd, how did you get started in speaking and being an author, and how your story started?
Yeah, it kind of chokes me up to even think about it, because to think that I actually wrote a book that made, the bestseller list just blows my mind. And, I joke, I didn't read my first book until my first year in college. And just to see where I went from to now is pretty amazing. But the reason why I do what I do and why I'm so passionate about it is, when I was 11 years old, I took my first sip of alcohol, and I didn't get drunk or anything, but I fell in love with the rush of doing something like that. And a couple years later, at age 13 and 14, is when I got involved with other drugs like marijuana. And that just, I learned at a young age I had this all or nothing mentality, and I was all in. And that just, as everybody knows, that just leads to all the other drugs out there, which I got involved with. Basketball was a big part of my life. My dream was to get a college scholarship, which I did. I worked so hard and I got it, but I ended up losing it because of my addiction. And when that happened, I basically just said, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to be here. And I had planned my suicide, and I was going to end my life, and I had something miraculous happen. For those out there, whether you believe in a higher power or God or the universe, but I got this answer that was just unmistakable, that changed my life forever. And it was in that moment when I said, I want to dedicate my life to helping other people and help them get past, what they might be struggling with, or to keep them from going down the road that I went on. So that's in it. It's a quick way of saying it, but that's why I do what I do, and I'm really passionate about it because of what I had gone through.
Yeah. So tell us, like, that's part of your book, but tell us, so what happens? What do you do when you get those thoughts, like, I'm not good enough, or what, or what's wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can we do when we get those thoughts? Because I think everyone has those.
Yeah, everyone has them. We all go through it. And the thing is, we're not born that way. We weren't born telling ourselves we're not good enough. We weren't born telling ourselves that, I can't measure up. Those aren't even a part of our DNA at that moment. We learn this as we get older. And like every kid, we go through a transitional period where we're trying to find ourselves in the world. Some people go through some difficult times. They get bullied, or they've been abused, and they start telling themselves a different story. And I want to start off by saying a couple things. The belief dictates our behavior. So if we believe anything, good or bad, it will dictate the way we behave. And, the most powerful force in the human psyche is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so when I got to a certain age when I noticed that I was, I had this voice in my head. It was around 7th grade where I just thought I looked funny. Again, I'm not good enough. I'm different, so I can't connect. And ultimately, there's just something wrong with me. And that was a very kind of self-defeating belief system that led to me feeling depressed and sad. And then when I discovered drugs and alcohol, it was a great way to go, wow, that kind of takes me from that mindset, at least for a little bit. And, but that fueled that. But so anyone who's listening to this can relate. You all have this voice in your head at times that tells you that you're no good, you'll never measure up, you can't do it. I mean, I used to think there's no way I could write a book, let alone be a bestseller. I mean, and here we are. It blows my mind, but it proves the power of belief because I put it out there. I'm saying I can do these kind of things. And so what we have to do is we have to learn to tell ourselves a different story. And that takes effort. It takes sometimes blood, sweat, and tears because I told myself for years and years and years that I wasn't good enough. And to just suddenly change that, it doesn't happen that way. But what you do is you recognize the thought that you're having or the story, you then objectify it and you call it something other than you. That's not me. I wasn't born that way, right? And I actually call that voice the bully. And so I'll label that any negative thought, there's the bully, there it is. And it just helps me separate from that thought because I'm not that thought. And then I tell myself the opposite and add my name. So for instance, when the thought comes in, I'm not good enough, I would say, oh, there it is. There's that bully. And then I say, Todd, I Todd am powerful beyond measure, or I Todd am a masterful creator. And I know people hear this and they go, oh, that sounds cute or whatever. But I'm telling you, when you really do it and you really start reshaping that self-image by a different story, it changes everything. Because again, belief dictates our behavior.
Yes. And there's so much power in those words, whether you're saying it out loud or in your mind.
Right. Absolutely. And the words that follow I am will follow you. So if you're constantly telling you, I am no good, I am stupid, I am not pretty, I'm whatever, that will follow you. And then you wonder why you're sad and depressed. A lot of times it's because of that story. And that story seems real to you. I'm not trying to minimize it. It doesn't feel real to the person who's struggling with it. But with my clients, I help them identify this story, and then we start reshaping it with some tools and some exercises that literally, changes everything. And every, drug addict and alcoholic I work with who they do have this negative story, showing them how to get past that and overcome it. It's such a cool thing when, oh, really, all I had to do is change this story and then the drugs and the alcohol and that desire goes away. It's actually pretty phenomenal.
Is there a piece of this where forgiveness comes in? And I mean, forgiveness of yourself.
Sure.
So I think a lot of times, like they're telling you the story, but then you can change the story, but then you haven't forgiven yourself for the person that you were. How do they overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Melanie. Most people I deal with, including myself when I was going through it, we feel a lot of shame. And there's guilt and shame, and it's really, what I'd like to say is there's a huge difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is I've done something wrong and I shouldn't do again. I had this feeling of that was wrong. Shame is I'm wrong or I'm bad. And shame is that where you kind of play the victim to, I'm just a bad person. I'll never change. And that keeps us from ever forgiving ourselves. It seems to be easy to forgive others at times, but we'll never, or not never, but we struggle forgiving ourselves. So it's about recognizing, am I really a bad person, or did I just do something wrong and it feels bad? And that's typically the case when you point that out. So, but that's a huge step in the direction of healing and getting recovered, is identifying the shame, seeing it for what it really is, and understand that at the time you were doing the best you could with what you knew. If I look back of all the bad things I've done, and if I held on to that, I probably would be cultivating this shame. But realizing, hey, I was a human being who didn't at the time maybe know what I know now. And so, but that's a great question, but that's something that needs to be resolved in order to move forward as well.
So what happens when you feel like you have, you're in a better place and you feel like, it's been a few months that you've been doing okay and you haven't had the bad thoughts, or if they do, you instantly can, tell yourself something good. But then it's almost like you're at this peak and then you drop. like it happens again where you're just like, oh, I'm just not, and you're just having one of those days where everything is going wrong and you're just feeling so depressed about everything. What
Right.
can you do to get out of that?
Well, again, you got to recognize the principle behind that, because the principle is this: thought creates emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the universal law.
Mm-hmm.
It's our thinking that makes us feel. So if I all of a sudden, I'm doing really well, it means I'm thinking good thoughts. And then all of a sudden something happens, but it's not really all of a sudden, it's just my thoughts changed. Now it could be based off something I'm dealing with that's heavy, a loss of a job, or even if we lose a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's our thoughts that make us feel that depressed feeling. And a lot of times we get stuck in that cycle. So it's recognizing I'm telling myself all these negative things. That's why I feel. So so for your listeners, it's paying attention to how you feel. So if I'm feeling sad right now, what I would do is I would process that. I'd go, okay, what are my thoughts right now? What am I thinking about? Oh yeah, I'm thinking today's, not a good day because it's rainy, it's cold. I didn't want to get up. I've got to work a 12-hour shift tomorrow, and it's not even tomorrow yet, but I'm thinking that that's going to be horrible. And so that's why I feel down. Change your thoughts, you change your life. Because thoughts not only create negative emotions, they create positive ones as well.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds so simplistic, but think good thoughts and you'll feel good. It's again, it's a principle, it's a law.
Yeah. I think some of it too is it's the thoughts and your words, your conversation. Jen and I even identified that here we don't get to see each other in person too often, and then so we're so excited when we do, and then we're both single moms, and we started having these conversations, these ex-husband conversations, and we went from these smiley faces to these. And then the feelings happened. I was like, you know what? Let's make a pact. We're just not allowed to talk about them anymore. Like they're not supposed to be part of our conversation, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'm glad you point that out, because again, when we're talking maybe in more of a negative way, or reliving some of the negative past,
yes,
you're right. That makes us feel, again, in the moment, we feel sad and down. It kind of brings the energy down, right? And so that's a great way to say that, Melanie.
Yeah, well, I think you brought up a really good point about listening to your feelings, or taking a moment and saying, why do I feel this now?
Yeah.
Because life is so busy with all the things coming at us. And I mean, I know as a single mom, or even I'm sure any mom or dad, or just anyone who has lots of stuff going on in their life, whether they have kids or not, there's so many things going on. You have to take a moment and think about that and say, how do I feel right now? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? And what am I really saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to share just a quick little story of a former client of mine. He was an ex-Navy SEAL, and he was your typical ex-Navy SEAL, like you would think. He was all muscly, he had a tough jaw. I mean, alpha male. I mean, ego as big as this room. And when I first met with him, my very first session with him, he's sitting on kind of the edge of the couch, and he's just like really pumped, and like, he goes, Todd, he goes, I want every book you have. I want to do everything I have. He goes, I will be your best client. And I believed him when he was saying this. And then he goes, I am willing to do anything. And I said, okay, you're willing to do anything? And he said, yeah. And I said, outside my window in my office, you can see this little teeny pond. Said you're willing to do anything, right? And so anyway, long story short, he starts sitting by this park bench, right? This tough ex-Navy SEAL guy. Well, about the third session with him, he finally sits down and he's just real relaxed. And I go, hey, how's things going? And he goes, I'm finally understanding why you're having me sit by the pond. And I go, what's that? He goes, I'm learning to just listen to the pond. And to this day, guys, this ex-Navy SEAL, it's been 4 years now. He's been clean off of alcohol for 4 years. And he says that teeny little pond saved his life.
wow.
And I said, it really wasn't the pond that saved your life. It was the silence. See, he had to learn to silence his thoughts. He was thinking, like, if I read every book, then I'll be okay. But his problem wasn't, he didn't need to read another book necessarily. He had to sit and learn to slow his thoughts down and just be present. And I'm not kidding you. And that's the power of our thinking, good or bad, but the power of just being present as well. But, you know, it's interesting. You see a Navy SEAL saying that pond saved his life.
Yeah.
It's the neatest thing. So.
That
It's
is so cool.
excellent.
What a great story. I bet you have a thousand of those great stories.
Thousands of them. I do. Yeah. And this is why I'm passionate about what I do. I get to see people change right before my very eyes who have been struggling, and now they're just living lives of, you know, free from those negative thoughts, those negative stories, those negative belief systems. And to see them, you know, thrive in life is really just, it's the greatest drug for me on the planet.
Do you think somebody can do it on their own, or they really should have somebody that helps them, or accountability, even if it's not a professional? What's the best way for someone to do this?
That's a great question. You know, I mean, is it possible to do it on your own? I really do believe it is, but it's highly unlikely. All of us, we all need some guidance. Like, I mean, how many times, Melanie, maybe where you've been even struggling and you've talked to someone, you knew the answer, but you just needed to hear it from
Yeah.
someone else. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, connection is the opposite of addiction. And so when we can connect with someone who's got our back, who's got our best interest at heart, who can listen to us and give us true, honest feedback,
Yeah.
that is critical in moving forward. So I always recommend, it's always good. I mean, even a life coach needs a life coach. Even a therapist needs a therapist, you know, that kind of thing. And so I think it's critical in moving forward as well, is that we do reach out and have somebody to throw stuff out, and they'll give us some true, honest feedback. Feedback should be our best friend, actually.
Yeah.
And what do you think about, I'm sorry, Jen, I had one more question, not kind of on this. Is it, what if someone says, well, it's really chemical? You know, what I have, I feel I get these ebbs and flows and downs, but I think it's chemical. So I'm just going to take some more, you know, prescription type drugs to get through that.
Right.
What's
Well,
your thought on that?
Well, and that's another great question, Melanie. But, you know, I can't sit here and prove to you it's not chemical. I do believe there's some people that, you know, there's a chemical imbalance and they feel depressed. They have chronic depression. I understand that. And I'm not trying to minimize that that isn't real. But what I've found with even my clients who are, you know, clinically depressed and chronically depressed, and or they're suffering from anxiety, yes, medication does play a part in it in the beginning, but when they learn to control the way they think, and when their awareness grows around that, and they think, wow, I really am powerful.
Yeah.
They can start weaning off the meds and actually, you know, learn to control that and to be in that type of position. It's an empowering position. Are there cases where people do need to be on medication? Yeah, and I'm not against it. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your book and how your book's going. I know that it was released and you have it on
Elite
ebook and
Online
paperback.
Publishing.
Yeah, you have it on ebook and paperback. Where can people go to find your book? And you have a podcast too. Tell us a little bit about the podcast so people can go and listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, the book, by the way, is fantastic. You know, you can get it on Amazon for sure. It's also on iBook, and it's a few other places too. I mean, there's actually, thanks to you guys, it's in a lot of different places where they can go get it. But Amazon's probably the best place. Most people are familiar with Amazon, and it's going well. I mean, I'm pinching myself honestly that I have a best-selling book, and you know, I've had so much feedback, and the way you guys helped market the book and stuff was fantastic. And, you know, and all the steps you showed me on what to do really helped a ton as well. But it's been fantastic. And so, yeah, if you want to read the, you know, I Am Recovered, Amazon's the best place, I think, to go grab that. And then with my podcast, I actually call it a Belief Cast, and it's my 100th episode will air on Monday.
Oh, awesome.
And I've had some amazing guests, and it's people who are doing amazing things. They've overcome addiction, or they've overcome depression, or, you know, I've had people who have had heart transplants on there, and all kinds of amazing stories, people that have overcome just insurmountable odds. And it's just been such a fun ride with that. And I call it a Belief Cast, and, you know, people can check that out on iTunes or Google Play, or, you know, all the other platforms. But so yeah, things are going really well.
That's great. Well, you guys can check out his book and his podcast at his website, ToddSylvesterInspires.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. We'll put that
Terrific.
in the show notes and up on YouTube so people
Great,
can
thank
click
you.
on that link.
Thanks for stopping by, Todd. We really appreciate it. Our #1 best-selling author by Elite Online Publishing. That's Jen's and my company. I just have to brag a little bit.
Yes.
So we'll see you next time. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast because we have #1 best-selling authors here. We have people that teach you how to make your business blow up, how to make your mental ability better, how to make you emotionally better, physically better. And overall, we just think we're making the world a better place. So come join us. We'll see you next time, and have a great week.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.